Before we get into the video, I have a huge favor to ask. I've had many people complain that they are not seeing my videos pop up anymore. My favor is to check that you're still subscribed and that you have notifications turned on. Otherwise, you're not going to see all my content. It's very much appreciated and it does help the channel. Anyways, on to the story. Blood and Snow, written by Yellow Clad. It had been 5 years since humanity recovered fully from the societal collapse brought on by a man-made virus. 5 years since a certain clandestine agency had been called to stand down from active duty, their purpose fulfilled. 5 years. That's how long it took for some semblance of order to survive and begin to thrive. 5 years. 5 years till they arrived. Humanity was still rebuilding, but world governments had been restored. Hostile factions no longer roamed the streets, killing and looting just to stay alive, and nobody had to fear the green poison anymore. Things were looking brighter, till the Ilgri Imperium appeared in our solar system's doorstep. Humanity was focused inwards at the time. It takes a lot of time, focus, and resources to rebuild a civilization, and considering the damage caused across the entire world, there was a lot of rebuilding to do. So nobody could be blamed for keeping their gazes firmly focused on the ground rather than the sky. And it wasn't like anyone was using Hubble or the James Webb to keep an eye out for aliens. So when the Ilgri, in all their tentacled horror, descended upon the planet, it took everyone by complete surprise. They had long ago detected Earth and its abundant resources, long before humanity had left the Stone Age and decided that it was theirs. However, due to the limitations of their near FTL jump drives, they were forced to take the long journey over the many thousands of years before only just arriving. But it was worth it. The resources would ensure their species' dominance over the galaxy would continue for another 10,000 years. Of course, time moved on while they slept. Humanity grew and evolved, propagating across the entire planet, till nearly every inch was ours. And for the Ilgri, their own society grew and evolved. The mission to Earth not quite forgotten, but put out of mind for the time being. They would check in when they could, but for now they had other things to worry about. When the Ilgri finally descended upon the beautiful jewel of humanity, they were most displeased to find us already there, as it meant they'd have to expend precious resources and manpower just to subjugate the primitive peoples of the planet. But this planet was theirs, and they would use any means to reclaim it from the barbarians. The first any human knew of this was when an electronic device with a speaker began to broadcast, alerting everyone to the fact that they were not alone in the universe.
Primitive creatures, your world belongs to the Ilgri Imperium. Submit, and you shall be shown mercy.
It was a generous offer, they felt, one that would, if accepted, ensure that these barbarians became enlightened beings, perhaps even equals rather than servants and slaves. After all, they would surely recognize the complete superiority of the Ilgri and fall in line without question. Needless to say, they were a bit surprised when humanity went straight to the nuclear option. Every nuclear-capable country and several of those that supposedly weren't launched their stockpiles of ICBMs straight at the Ilgri Armada. The sudden and ferocious first strike from humanity was enough to shock the Ilgri into inaction, allowing several of their larger ships to be destroyed in a nuclear inferno before they wiped out the rest of the missiles. Anger rose amongst those that survived, and they decided that perhaps humanity deserved forceful subjugation over peaceful assimilation. Their first strikes hit targets of clear military importance, crippling many recently rebuilt bases and manufacturing installations. From there, it was a rather bog-standard orbital insertion and ground forces encountering the last of the military resistance. Several of the smaller and more impoverished nations fell immediately, surrendering without complaint. Other places, such as Africa, were a bit tougher to crack, but considering the fractured state of the people there, it didn't take that long. But it was places like Europe, Asia, and the Americas that would be the hardest nuts to break. Each played to their own strengths. China with their massive population, Russia with their reinstitution of the not one step back tactics, the rest of Europe uniting as one entity and combining their strengths as a diverse fighting force. America, though. America was hit the hardest, it seemed. It took a week for the enemy to invade D.C., and when they did, there was no way to get the president out. The designated survivors already in hiding. It was as the alien forces began to assault the White House that a general broadcast was made. The grizzled face of the president appeared on any television and phone that still functioned. He looked somber, but with a burning anger and defiance behind his eyes. My fellow Americans, I am saddened to say that D.C. is on the verge of collapse. Our nation once again falling down around us. As this is the case, I am reinstituting Directive 51. To whomever takes my place, use the power I'm giving you wisely. Make these invaders pay for every inch of ground they take with gallons of their blood. He looked up, his gaze hardening as the sound of alien speech filtered over the airwaves. The Secret Service rushed to his side. Nobody heard his last words as he pulled a pistol and began firing at alien soldiers off camera, before the feed went dead. The Ilgri knew not what Directive 51 was, nor did they really care. Whatever it was wouldn't stop their rightful appropriation of the planet. The White House burned once more, the president lay dead, and the occupying forces began to round up civilians for processing. They were confident in their assured victory. They weren't expecting further resistance. A week after the final broadcast of the American president, and after many camps had been erected to handle the influx of prisoners who were to be rehabilitated, attacks began as first snow fell. Many soldiers reported strange human tech being used, small drones with ballistic weaponry attached to the underside, or ones that dropped explosives from the sky. A patrol would turn the corner only to find a small motorized ball rolling towards them, only to explode amidst their ranks. Skirmishes ended quickly, and the commanders expected a massive force to be conducting these attacks. But when the first real surveillance footage appeared, it was quite shocking to find that the attacks were conducted either by lone humans or very small groups. Each of them bearing all manner of gear and wearing some sort of respirator masks, as the Ilgri had resorted to using a choking but non-lethal gas weapon to incapacitate targets. Ilgri blood turned the pristine white snow black. It was maddening that such small forces could cause such immense destruction. As checkpoint after checkpoint started to fall to these humans, word soon reached the prisoners, and the guards began hearing one word repeated over and over again with whispered conversations. Division. Things escalated when a group of these humans infiltrated a command base under the cover of night, their weapons silenced and more lethal than the Ilgri would have liked. Room by room they moved, dispatching anyone in their way with cold efficiency. They had nearly made it to the command bunker when they were finally spotted and the base came alive. Gunfire lit up the night. Orders were barked and losses were taken heavily. For all the martial and technological strengths of the Ilgri, they could not seem to kill these particularly troublesome humans. Inside the command bunker sat an aged Ilgri, the leader of this particular expedition, and he was growing increasingly worried. He was worried because the sounds of fighting had stopped, and someone was doing something to the door. There was a heavy thunk when the middle of the thick door bulged, melting before his very eyes. His security detail prepared themselves as a neat hole was burned into the door. Thwomp, thwomp, thwomp. That was the last thing any of them heard, as whatever was attached to the door shot objects the size of tennis balls through the hole it had just made, before they detonated in a flash of light and the sound that left their eyes watering and ears bleeding. A ringing filled the commander's mind, and he stumbled backwards, falling over his chair, just as his vision began to come back. The door was now wide open, and he saw a human arm swing into view, tossing a large half-sphere into the room. It landed on the flat side, and he could see what looked like a glowing orange dots on it. Whatever it wasn't good, and it was suddenly rather hostile as it shot small clouds of tiny machines into the air, each grouping of machines seeking out its security troopers and setting them ablaze. As they screamed and patted themselves down, the humans finally entered, their weapons puffing and putting the troopers down, out of their misery, one might say. The base commander reached for his own weaponry, only for a bullet to shatter his hand, another two taking out his legs, leaving him immobile on the ground. It gave him time to study the humans. They wore what was clearly civilian clothing, but over that was military gear. Minimal in some cases, more extreme in others, especially when it was a human carrying a very large gun. But the one thing that bound them all together was a device on their wrist, a device with an orange circle. The humans conversed in a non-vocal manner before something else, something clearly artificial, spoke loud enough for him to hear. Active terminal located. Databases accessible. Hostile VRP nearby. It made him shiver to hear that voice, though he didn't know why. The humans split up, one of them moving towards his personal computer, the others heading for the door to keep out unwanted guests. But the one that seemed to be the leader of the group moved over to him and crouched before him, looking over his injuries. I hope you know what sunlight feels like, pal, because where you're going, you won't ever be experiencing it again, the human said, just as the commander passed out. The following week saw more coordinated and larger assaults on Ilgri installations, freeing prisoners, disrupting convoys, the work of a well-organized group of combatants. Within a month, the Armada went silent as well, their ships boarded en masse by these fearsome agents of humanity. 2 months later, the Imperium decided it was time to check in on their expedition, and a trio of ships they sent using their relatively new FTL systems soon dropped out of warp to investigate. One of those older ships that now drifted through space towards the home system. They found it torn to shreds, empty, save for the heads of every command officer that had been sent to Earth arrayed on the bridge. The sigil of the Imperium had been defaced, replaced with a bird on fire, and surrounded by an orange circle. Beneath it were 4 words that they couldn't make sense of at the time, but later it would become a phrase that all in the galaxy would associate with humanity. Extremis Malis, Extrema Remedia. End of story. I would just like to thank the T5 supporters: Bushmaster 117, Caspar Arnholtz, Draxzoon WRE, Elijah Silvercross, Gray, John Carrington, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.